And the reason for that is because broad jump is really measuring your lower body power, your ability for your legs to generate power. And in a lot of sports, that's crucial for success. Now, bowling's not an explosive sport like soccer or football or basketball, but we do see that individuals that do well in these tests typically do a better job at changing speed because they're going to rely more on their legs to develop their speed as opposed to the upper body. So they're going to be a lot more consistent in changing their ball speed as well. And so just some numbers of individuals that we have tested. These are the top 3 numbers for the broad jump. So we have Jesse Buss, who is a former Junior Team USA member and PBA player. He recently just jumped 114.5 inches. So this is measured from the tips of the toes to the heel, and they have to stick the landing in order for this number to count. So if they fall off balance, it doesn't count. So Jesse could actually jump a lot further, but he wasn't able to hold his landing. So this is where he was able to jump while still sticking the landing. Then we have David Jecko and Jalen Scott Jones that have come in for different camps and also for the combine. And down below we have one Team USA player, Stephanie Johnson, who jumped 82 inches, and Sandra Anderson from Team Sweden, who jumped 81 inches. But this was topped by Natasha, who came in with a TNBA group a few years ago. And like I said, we also use the vertical jump. It's really testing the same area. We're looking at overall athleticism and lower body power. But instead of jumping out horizontally, we're jumping vertically. So it takes a little bit different technique. And our top numbers are 34 and 33 inches on the guys. The girls is a tie at 24.5. So with vertical jump and broad jump, a lot of our top numbers are going to be from younger players because as we get older, our ability to jump and produce power is going to decrease. That's a natural decrease. So we see a lot of developing players and players that you probably might not have heard of that will do well at these tests, but the more established and veteran players will be better at some of the other tests that we'll go over later. Next we have grip strength. So we measure the peak gripping power of an individual. So we actually measure this in kilograms. And on the guy's side, we actually feel that there is a cap to this. As if you ever go into the gym and look at the leaderboard, a lot of the leaders in this test are not national team players, so we feel that there might be too much grip strength, but we feel that you need a large amount of grip strength to begin with. A lot of times grip strength can be considered a bad byproduct of either a bad ball fit that's causing an individual to have to squeeze, hold onto the ball, or they're muscling their shot. It can, over time, cause excess grip strength, but we feel that having a large amount of grip strength to begin with is crucial to being able to relax your grip pressure. It's like having a car with a big engine versus a car with a small engine, and both of them going up a hill. The one with the larger engine is going to have an easier time going up the hill because they're not going to have to use as much energy to get up the hill as opposed to the small one. So players with more grip strength are going to be able to relax it and be more comfortable holding onto the ball and releasing it more consistently.
Yeah, we think, don't look at this about strength of how much they can squeeze it. We think that the higher grip strength is the ability to relax it and not lose it, not have to grab it. So as an analogy of a car, you got a 4-cylinder or an 8-cylinder and you got a hill. Which one you got to start giving it more gas because it's running out of energy to start getting gravity. That big V8 can just stay consistent. So adjusting the grip strength is an important variable for players to get a little more gravity, a little softer with the hand, a little nicer to it. I think the ability to have this strength is going to be more important that they can actually relax. If someone has low grip strength, it's just going to be holding on to it as hard as they can all the time. Yes?
Where do you think that threshold is? 40 kilograms, 50?
I think for the guys, it's about 60 kilograms.
Okay.
And then for the girls, we actually see a lot more of the higher level girls having, being on the leaderboard. So with the girls, in women, the more grip strength they have, it seems to be better than. So we haven't found a cap on the female side
Would
yet.
there be a correlation between ball weight and grip strength? I mean, if you're a really strong grip strength guy, are you better off throwing 16?
We haven't looked at that
But
yet.
I think it would definitely be independent.
Okay.
I would definitely think it'd be independent.
So you guys can see those numbers. And if you go into the gym, you'll see on the girl side, we have the top 10 for each of these tests, and there's a lot more national team members on the women's side right now than on the men's side. Next we have the balance test. So this is probably the most important test that we do in the gym. It's looking at lower body strength. So the vertical jump and the broad jump are looking at power, but the balance test is looking at strength. So the stronger your legs are, the better your neuromuscular control is going to be, and thus your better balance you're going to have. And how we test this is we have this device right here, and you push it in 3 directions. We take the max distance at your reach in all 3 directions, and we put those numbers into a formula. It gives us a score. And what this score is, this is actually a percentage of how far the individuals are able to reach in relative to their leg length. So, for example, Shannon O'Keefe right here, she's able to reach out 105.3% of her leg length on average in all 3 directions. So that's very significant. When we first started doing this test, I envisioned that elite players would be able to do 90% of their leg length, but we've actually seen that they can surpass that by a significant amount.
What's interesting too is this is the first time you're seeing national team players from several federations in the top. This is the one area that when we started doing it, we realized that this is a developed, acquired skill. They haven't trained to increase their balance, but as the older players as well established players are very good at this. They might not be good at vertical jump or the broad jump, but they were really good at this. So part of our job is to get those people that are good with explosive legs to this point. They're probably not training players enough to work on a lower leg balance. But it's been interesting. I mean, Tommy Jones did that with a bad hip, you know, and he never had done this ever before. But it was interesting to see that high-skilled players, established world-class players, were naturally good at this, and they've never done this test before.
Yeah, a lot of these players are just getting it from the thousands and thousands of shots that they've thrown. And so this is where we really work on implementing that players should really work on strengthening their legs and working on balance exercise so they can see significant increases in their physical game without having to throw all the shots that the more established players have had. So we can kind of bridge the gap between the young players being really good at the vertical jump and shorten the time before they're good with this. So things you can do to work on that are obviously strengthening legs through squats and lunges and deadlifts, but also doing single leg balance exercises, sitting on one leg, reaching out in multiple directions, bending over, and then also reaching out and taking your leg back at the same time. So you can really work on the balance, and they can see significant changes in their finish position. We also do a 12-minute run. We want to look at the player's physical fitness. We want to make sure that they're active in other sporting activities or fitness levels and not sitting on a couch playing video games all the time. This also gives us a good indication of their motivation levels. We have, oftentimes when teams are in, we have them going up against each other. We have 4 treadmills in the gym, and we'll have all 4 going at the same time. And so it gives us a good insight into their competitiveness, because a lot of times they'll want to be running and trying to beat their teammates and how far they're able to run. So we're getting a lot of mental aspects of how the player is developed as well.
You never ran into a player that was like competition or wanted to compete, right?
Yes.
Nick, is there a developmental window for balance, backing up that one slide?
I think a lot of it's going to be in the strength window, so the later teen ages of the players.
Thank you.
Yep. And if you look into the Canadian Sport for Life, there is a cardiovascular window that we did not hit on, but as you do further research, you'll be able to find that information. So these are the numbers for our top bowlers. And there's a lot of people that say that bowlers are not in shape, but I say that anyone that can run over 1.89 miles in 12 minutes is in pretty good shape. I know that I can't do that. I'm better at eating hot dogs.
He's actually a champion, he has a plaque.
I even beat Bill Ballard, but he was taking his time. So these are our top scores. And once you can see that a lot of the top national players are really good at cardiovascular fitness. This helps their overall muscular endurance throughout competition, so their mental status is going to be a lot sharper as the blocks are longer. And then that leads us to the functional movement screen. This is a series of tests. There's 7 exercises that basically graded on the quality of technique or their ability to move through the exercise. Since there's 7 exercises, the max score is 21 points, so you get 3 points if you can do a single exercise perfectly, 2 if you have some errors, 1 point if you can't do the exercise, and 0 points if you have pain. So it's also a screen looking for pain that may be an indication of an injury that needs to be looked at. So for example, Shannon right here is doing one of the exercises called an inline lunge, and this would be considered a 3. A 2 would be if at any time the bar came not in contact with her butt, her shoulders, or her head. So it's looking at her ability to control her body, her posture throughout the entire movement. There's other exercises like a deep squat. So if you're not able to squat all the way down, like a lot of times people are squatting like this, and that would be considered a 2 or even a 1, depending on how bad it is. And so these are the top scores for the functional movement screen. As you can see, this is where the national team members have really gone up to the top of these scores. So they're also one of the best bowlers in the world too.
Now, one thing about the functional movement screen that helps us as coaches is we can see if there's liability on one side of the body versus the other. This sport was taught in the past to keep one side quiet. Don't use it, don't engage that side. So one side became very strong and your core became imbalanced and stuff. And then we're starting to see a lot of national players now, the really good ones. There's good balance on both sides. There's not limitations of flexibility there. The interesting thing about this test, Nick introduced it to the bowling world. Now we have federations, we have colleges, even some high schools implementing this. You can look this up on the internet and get certified to do this with your national team and everything like that. You start seeing liability. This is one of the things that we're sharing, that you don't have to come down to ARC to get this. I mean, we do have this. This is something that you can actually do in your program as well. Yep.
And then we also have a number of imbalances. So this is going back to the balance test. So the balance test looks for a strength score, but also looks for imbalances. And basically, the simple way to do it is if you're standing on one leg and they're reaching out in front and they got a score, we want the score on the opposite foot in the same direction to be within 4 centimeters of each other. And so we do that in all 3 directions. And if there's an imbalance, so if one side is stronger than the other side in multiple directions, that can lead to knee problems, hip problems, low back problems. And we want to limit the number of imbalances so that players can stay healthier longer and prolong their careers. And so there's also oftentimes just there's an imbalance because they're just not used to being on one foot. Because a lot of times a right-handed bowler is not going to be good in this position here. So we really have to be careful how we look at it. So we have to look at all 3 directions and look and see which side is the stronger of the 2. But doing simple exercises, doing an extra amount of repetitions of an exercise on their weaker side can help balance that out very quickly and have benefits in their physical game.
So that brings up the bowling combine. The bowling combine was something that it took a couple of years to come up with. We played with. Part of it is the ETA is actually part of the base of the bowling combine. The thought process got caught, especially with Kim Terrell Kernan. She was coaching a collegiate team, and part of it is how do we get them better and how do you find recruits? It was hard for colleges to actually find recruits. Now, Wichita is famous. They just show up on Gordon's door.
Wish that was true.
But some of these colleges just didn't have a way to find the players. How can we connect? There was a big disconnect between the players and the coaches. So part of this whole ETA was developed on this bowling combine. So when we have the bowling combine, we put them through all the tests, we measure carry angles, we do the functional movement screen, we look at balance, we measure the releases, we look at their consistency on lanes, and we create data. The coaches can make valid decisions on the performance of the player. Not how they score, but on their skill level and their versatility level. We use a track, still do, when we compete internationally with Team USA, both youth, men and women. Strike percentage, carry percentage, high pocket, pocket, light pocket, spare percentage, split percentage. We track everything. That gives us information on their performance. But it really is hard to take that and say, this is what you need to train on. Because that's how they performed in the event. We really need to decide what do we need to do for their skill level before that event. And then when we get to it, a coach needs to know what the versatility range of their players are. You lose credibility with your players if you ask, I need you to get up the back of the ball more. And they can't. Because they're at their maximum now. They're at 45, 30, whatever it is. They're at their maximum now. Or I need you to throw it fast. You just got to throw the ball harder. They're at their maximum. They can't. You need to know what the ranges the players have and utilize those tools. Because some players, we might need to get them on the side of the ball. And the other player, we just need you to throw it fast. We have to find a way because the ball's reading too soon. Or it's going too long. We have to find a way to get the ball to pick up sooner. You know, it's a game of front to back, not side to side. It's front to back, controlling that front to back. And utilizing those tools that those players have is what we need. So, back to the combine. We take, they actually give them a test. What's the name of that test, Brian?
Bowling IQ test.
In bowling IQ test, it is amazing how many, well, you probably wouldn't have me, how many bowlers at this level can't keep score.
Yeah.
Now, this needs to stay in this room. But the very first question on the test, what pin is this? And the pin standing is the 5 pin. And I had conversations with my staff, and this is ridiculous, we can't be putting that question on. It is missed. It is multiple choice, and they miss it. So, getting back to our youth, we probably need to work on that knowledge a little bit more, that training a little bit more. The reason I say keep in the right, I don't want you to go out and the first question on the test is the 5 pin. Then you have it. They don't even know the pin numbers. So, the environment is changing. Now, when I say about this bowling combine, this idea is taking off. Now we have regionals are doing similar things, evaluations and stuff. We should have been doing this 20 years ago. Back when Cass was first introduced stuff, we should have been doing this skill acquisition 20 years ago. Too much has been based off average and scoring, and not on skill acquisition, skill development, versatility adjustments. So that brings up what we have, the elite training assessment. Can we pass those out? What we're going to give you is Chris Barnes' and Kelly Coolidge's elite training assessment from last year. I'm going to kind of walk you through what we're looking at. They hated doing this at first. No one likes to sit out there and just throw shot after shot after shot, and then you're just tracking. Because the players say, well, what's in it for me? All you're doing is getting information for you. We let them know, we studied the best. We want to see what they're doing, how are they doing it, why does it work, how can we get other people to do that. Because if you talk to any high-end player, you talk to any player, they want to throw it like so-and-so. Okay? Problem is someone else wants to throw it like them. Everyone wants to do it like someone else. We want to find out what do they like to do, how do they do it. So the first, we started generating this information. We didn't have a lot of stuff to give to the players. It took the second and really the third year for the players to really buy in. So this information is beneficial to them. Beneficial to them. And the reason is that we can track how they're doing. They can actually see how their performance is. Is it getting better or is it getting worse? Do they see improvement in their versatility and consistency? And what do they should be spending time working on? So we're going to be going through Chris March's page by page, trying to explain it. What you take away from this is try to find a way to implement something like this with your players. So they can actually track how they're getting better or if they're getting worse. So when they know what they're going to do with time on. Does everyone have their Chris March? We need a Kelly over here? We need 3 Kellys. Who's got Kellys?
Kelly's mixed in with Chris.
That's our department upstairs. Yeah, that's pretty good. If you traded 3 Kellys for 3 Chris's, that's a good exchange. For the people who got Kelly. All right, let's go ahead and we'll kind of start on the very first page. And what we do is, the very first page, we give you a summary. And what that summary is putting everything we tested them on into a graph and a chart. And the very top one, the very top up here, well, first of all, we look at current, 1 year and 2 years ago. So they get to see what did they do 2 years ago, what they did 1 year ago, and what's the current. As we move forward, we're going to continue doing this. Now, you had to have a base. In the first year you did, we couldn't say how you compared to anyone else, or how you did before. Now it starts becoming relevant to the players. So the very top, we're looking at the overall ranking. The overall ranking is putting everything together. How did your score average? This, I think, is a better representation of skill level than anything with average. And you can notice that Chris, 3 years ago, wasn't as good, and now his overall ranking is exactly the same. It's an E3. And the reason we went above elite, CACS going back to 1995 established the pro or the elite level as a consistency. And like I think Nick said, it's 0.46 or 0.47 miles an hour variation.
Yeah.
In the world today, that is not good enough. That's a half a mile an hour difference from shot to shot. That's not consistent. That's good, but we need to get better. So we added 6 levels above the elite. We wanted to make the bar so high that no one's going to max out. No, maybe in 20 or 30 years, 40 years, someone might eventually max out. But if we just stopped at that green line at elite, they said, I don't need to work on this. I'm already elite. We need to be able to measure it. So the release versatility. Chris is not as good this year as he was last year. And this gets to the point that it depends on the individual to be realistic with themselves. That it has to be what you would use in competition. At first, they want to say, I'm just going to get as much as I can. But then they finally realize, I'm not doing myself a service by trying to get as much as I can. It's got to be how good can I do it that I use in competition. Because you can throw it way on the side of the bowling ball, get 80, 90 degrees, and never use it in competition just to get a good score there. We had an individual the first year of the combine cheat the system because we were trying to look at the ranges of ball speeds, fast and slow. We did not envision this player would do this, but he came down to the lanes to throw it fast, grabbed the spare ball, and just threw it right down the middle as hard as he could. Well, it's not something he's going to use in competition, but boy, he got a good score on that because he had quite a range between his slow and his fast. So we want to make sure you don't cheat the system. Don't want to cheat the system, and it's got to be value for the coach and the player. The next one on the very bottom is the overall shot repeatability. How well were they able to repeat shots? And that's everything. Launch angle, break point, arrows, ball speed. On all the patterns, medium, fast, slow, short, long, everything thrown together. How much were they overall repeatability? Then we break it down into the release velocity range. That is, it probably is a bad term, range. That should be release velocity consistency. The smaller the number, the better you are. The bigger the number, higher the number, the less consistent you're going to be. You'll notice that we only have 2 years on that because we only been tracking that for 2 years. This is expanding all the time. We're trying to build this program better every year and adding different things that we need to measure. So release velocity range, that's telling us how consistent his timing is in all the different patterns. Target arrow, how accurate is he at the target? Breakpoint range, launch angle range. So notice you can see a big improvement with his consistency of ball speed and at the arrows. He stayed the same the last 2 years on breakpoint range and launch angle. And substantial better spare shoot. A lot better spare shoot. They hate the spare shoot. They hate it because we require 30 at each spare. How boring is that going to get for them? But he made a comment because, well, it's kind of interesting. They make a lot of comments. But we make them shoot 30 baby splits. We make them shoot 30 washouts. They hate the washouts. They say, Coach, we don't leave those. We don't leave washouts. We don't leave baby splits. But they got better at it. And then they went out there and started competing. They weren't missing them once in a while because they only shot them once every 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But now they had to find a way to get good at it. And they're being competitive, they're going to find a way, and it will bleed over into their performance. And then we look at the overall athleticism, and this is everything that Nick does with them in the gym. So this is a summary or a report card, so to speak, for that player. So now we can break into the next page, and we're going to dig into each one of the little areas. Next one is the release versatility summary. And at the top, we're looking at the overall versatility for the bowler's release. And then we break it down into the rotation range, rev rate range, and ball speed range. You notice that Chris is pretty much the same in ball speed range and rev rate range. His actual rotation went down because he realized, I'm not doing myself justice, just trying to get what I can use in competition. You know, they were just trying to get as much as they can. It's kind of like when Nick says, you get to the treadmill and they're all racing against each other. Everyone wants to have the biggest range. But that doesn't do them any good. And then we get into what Brian gave you the presentation, is the release ratios. The normal in the middle, maximum to the right, minimum. So if you needed the ball, the lanes have a lot of friction, you would use the releases to the right. If you had a lot of volume or less friction, you would probably want to be using the releases to the left. So this is looking at their ranges and what they're able to use. Now, it's not like absolute gears, first gear, second gear, third gear. They can vary on in between. We're just looking at their ranges, the versatility range. And this gets back into the release ratios that Brian was showing you. We're starting to see patterns based off speed. Now, this does not take into consideration rotation. That's a whole new formula called the skid ratio. And that's going to be incorporated into this too because that's the other variable. But we want to see what can that bowler do. We don't want to just be changing balls. We want to adjust the release, how the ball is reading the lane. So we go back to their personal release profile. Anyone that comes in here to ITRC, they will get their ball measured, their fit measured, and if they go through the program, we'll get this release ratio and this personal release profile. This is, as a ball driller, when I was in the pro shop, if I have a player walk in with this, I have everything I need. I don't need to see him throw a ball. Because right up here, I have their normal release. Tilt, rotation, rev rate, and their ball speed off their head. How many pro shop operators are in the room? Did you drill a ball for this player off that information? The layout? Yes, definitely. This takes time to get. That, boy, I would have loved if a player came in there with that information. Then we're looking at the versatility ranges. What are their ranges that they can do? Rotation, rev rate, ball speed. And here's their PAP. That's the other part that you guys would have needed. Now you have everything that you would need for that player. Here's the release rotation versatility. The red red is how they're able to come up the back. The blue is how much more they can go on the side. The black line in between them is their normal release. So this is the ranges that Chris can release the ball over. And here's their RPM versatility. If minimum he can get 360, maximum is 514. This is not made up numbers. This is with high-speed cameras. CATS is a very functional, a very useful tool, but it cannot measure RPMs. It can measure consistency based on maybe what your hand's doing. And there's a mathematical algorithm in there to give you an idea, which is a very good tool, but it's not going to be absolute. If you really want RPMs, you have to do it with high-speed cameras. And then here's his ball speed variation, 15.8 to 21.73, and he can use them. That's quite a range. So what was that study you said that they, between ball speed and quarter mile an hour?
Yeah.
Quarter mile an hour, so. That's a big difference right there. So, how to read the data graphs. What we have here to the left is going to be the player's personal score. And you're going to have the last 3 years. The one that's bold is going to be your current score in every attempt in that area. The shaded area represents the middle 50% of all the players in the group. That's going to be the 50 percentile in the group. The highest score is going to be at the top, lower score is going to be at the bottom. If you come in as a team, we will compare you to your team, to comparison teams. And then we have the optimal level for elite team or elite player. Now, are we perfect with that elite player? No. But we got some very high-end coaches. We got together and said, if you can have the perfect bowler, how good do they need to be here? Where can we have them try to get to achieve? Where's the point? How much range do they need to be? How consistent do they need to be? So that's where that elite level came from. So we break into Chris. And you can look there to the left. He is now at 17 degrees. 2 years ago, he was at 10 degrees. Chris's tilt has gone up the last 2 years. He's at the top of the 50 percentile for the 2013 team men. Compared to the 2012 team, going to the USA World Championship team, that was the team that competed in Munich. Team competed in Munich. And the elite level that we like to see. So what we're saying for men, and we have different graphs for men and women, they are different. They have to have different numbers. Right there at 17, we feel elite level is probably the maximum that you probably have in tilt. Doesn't mean you can't be higher, but then once you get over above that, you have liabilities. So then we break it down even deeper. So we go down to their normal axis rotation. Chris, for Team USA 2013, was at the very bottom. He was up the back the most out of all the players. But it's a very short window. He used to be at 45. He's now at 40. But you notice they're between 40 and 50. That's interesting. The whole team, normal release is between 40 and 50 degrees. The 2012 team was the same place, between 40 and 50. What's interesting, and we didn't plan this, the World Championship team, we took the Munich, they all 6 players were at 45 degrees. Just coincidence? It was interesting. And at elite level, we want to see, we can sit there, they can be up at 50, but this is an interesting pattern. Now we look at rotation range, how much they could change it. Team USA men, they could change 45 degrees. We had one player that could change 60 degrees. We had one player, he used to be able to change 60, remember, and now 55, 40. We had one player that could change 70 degrees. The elite level we would like to see is up there, bottom of 70 degrees, up to 80 degrees. And you can see on the team versus 2012, the team now is more versatile on how much they can change rotation. Then we look at the minimum. Chris's minimum now is 15. Used to be 20. Was 30. Minimum on some of the players was 35. Again, that yellow is the 50 percentile. Then 2012 team, the World Championship team, and where we see elite. So compared to the World Championship team, our players now can come up the back more than they could in 2012 for the World Championship team. We go back over here now, maximum, how much they can get on the side. We had one player who could get to 90, The average is about 68, Chris was at 60, and that seems pretty consistent all across the board for the different years. And then we come to axis rotation range. This shows how much axis rotation you have compared to what feels a useful range. We don't feel anything less than 10 degrees is usable, and we don't think anything over 90 degrees is usable. Over 90 degrees, the ball's actually spinning back towards you. At 10, less than 10 degrees, you're thumping, is not going to do any good. So we look the minimum minus the max divided. And this is, Chris is using 56% of we feel the potential he could use on the release on the maximum. That's how you would read this. So rev rate, same thing. We break down 424, the rev rate of the team compared to the earlier teams, the average. Interesting that the rev rate on Team USA 2013, the yellow box is pretty small. The 50 percentile are really tight. All have very similar rev rates for their normal rev rate. And then we look at their range, how much they can change. Some players can't change much. They can change about 60, 70 RPMs on their range. Some players get up there almost 180. And then we look at their minimum, and we look at their maximum, what they could do. Chris was up there on the top of the team for 2013 at 514. There was other players up there, but Chris was up there. And then we look at rev rate range change, based on how much they can change. It is easier to change a rev rate the higher it goes, because it's easier to drop down. It's hard with a 270 RPM rate to go much more, to drop down more. But if you have 500 normal, usually a little easier to go up and down some. It's interesting that the elite players rarely use their maximal RPMs. Rarely. They can do it. They can use it in competition, but their normal shots are only about 70-80% of what they can do. Yet you look at aspiring elite bowlers or tournament bowlers, they're using maximum every single time. Every single time. Okay, ball speed breakdown, release. This is their normal release ball speed. And it's interesting how tight a group Team USA men are. Very similar games the Team USA men have. And then we look at their release ball speed range. There was solid, Chris used to be 6.1, 5.92, very high as far as the ability to change ball speeds. Some player on Team USA team can only do like 1 3/4. The majority of them are between 3 and 4 miles an hour. I would like to see a minimum of 3 miles an hour change in ball speed. It doesn't have to be a mile and a half above, a mile and a half below. It could be a mile faster or 2 miles slower or vice versa, but I'd like to see 3 miles an hour difference in range. If you remember Brian's videos, 3 miles an hour difference between the ball going in the right channel and pocket. 3 miles an hour is quite a change that you can have on the lane. And then we look at their minimum release ball speed. How slow can they get versus how fast can they get? Again, when we're doing this, we're tracking them on their consistency at the arrows, at the break points, the launch angles. So it can't be just throwing it wherever you want to go. We're seeing how consistent can you be as well when you do this. And then this again is based on how much you can change your ball speed based on your normal. What percentage can you change it? So, shot repeatability summary, we continue on, we break it down. This was the overall shot repeatability. Here is long oil versus short oil. He's gotten much better on long oil in a year than he was the year before. More consistent. Slow speed versus fast speed. He's gotten better at throwing it slower. This is why something like this for your players is important. Something that you can actually measure. That they can see, I am improving, I'm getting better. Doesn't mean they have the knowledge when to use it, but they do have the skill. So then we break it down into long oil. He's got, again, we say he's better at long oil, and we find out why. He was better at every area on long oil. He improved his launch angle, his breakpoint control, his target, his release velocity. We come down here to short oil. He's the same overall. His range was better. He was more consistent with ball speed, but he lost a little accuracy at the arrows, the break point, and the launch angle. But overall, he was more consistent on the average, especially on that speed. So what was the two things, Brian, don't you have the biggest variance down the lane? Speed is one of them, isn't it? Okay. then we go into the speed, throwing it slow versus throwing it fast. Responsive balance, fast speed. And then we break it down, how do you compare to the other players? How do you compare to what you did before, overall target range, break point range, launch angle range? And then the fun part that they really love, spare shooting. He's gotten better. 7-pin, 10-pin, washout, 2/8, baby split. Now, this is not off percentiles. It's off difficulty to spare. We don't 10-pin and 7-pin single pin, that's going to be a percentage. I mean, we want to see 100%. It should be 100%. But a washout is going to be skewed a little bit because of difficulty to spare. So we still, what we want to see as far as the lead on the spares. We try to get at least 30 of them in.
I have a question.
Yes, Bert?
100% 10 pins and 7 pins. What was the elite level that you can get better than 100%?
You can't get, no,
What's
the lead level I think on the, is like 95,
90%?
96. We might let you miss 1 or 2. I'd have to go back and look at the data, but it's pretty high up there. They top 30 of them. And then we break down how do you do compared to what you did before against the rest of the team. Watch out 2/8 and the baby split. So now we come to mix.
All right. So, just like everything else, we have an overall summary of how he's done on each, as an overall and for each of the individual tests over the last 3 years. That's the overall. So we can see that he's gotten better over his second year, over his third year, but last year he was a little bit less than the year before. Now, with this, we have to keep in mind some of the things that are going on in their lives. Actually, Chris injured his calf playing basketball last year, and it was probably just a couple of months before camp, so he was still dealing with some issues with that. It's going to have some negative effects to some of these tests, so that's why his score is going to be a little bit less. Plus, he's a year older, and as we get older, other areas get harder to do as well. This is how he did overall. Actually, the functional movement screen, he did the same. His broad jump and vertical jump decreased, and this is going to be because of his injury to his calf. He's not going to be able to be as explosive because of that injury. And jumping, we use our calves a lot for that. Grip strength, he was the same. 12-minute run, he decreased a little bit. This is going to be because of age as well as the calf injury. Oops. The balance test, he did actually improved, and he didn't have any imbalances, so that was good. So his injury didn't have a negative effect on those parts of his athleticism. Then we have an overall athleticism score. So we have 7 tests that we look at up here, and we give each of them a value of 10 points for the overall score. And that's what this is. So there's a max score of 70 for the overall athleticism. So we can see that he scored 45 3 years ago, 54 2 years ago, and 51 last year. And this is how the rest of the team scored as well compared to past years. And then we break it up into individual tests. So we'll go with the broad jump first. So we can see that we actually had one individual not jump. So he wasn't able to get off the ground. He just physically didn't perform the test. And that would be Mike Fagan because he was too good for us and decided to go on his honeymoon instead of doing tests.
Priorities.
Yeah. We actually did most of the tests with him, but he was suffering an ankle injury, and so we didn't want to injure that, so we didn't do any of the jumping tests when we worked with him before camp. But overall, we can see that their jumping ability has actually gone up a little bit over the previous year, and especially over 2010's World Championship team. Now with the functional movement screen, I forgot to mention this earlier, that with the test, you really want to make sure that we're at a score of 15 or above. A lot of research has shown that if you score 15 or above, your risk of injury is normal, but if you score 14 or below, your risk of injury doubles. And so we really want to make sure that all our players are above this mark right here, which last year they were. And we've seen that the higher that score is, typically the better the physical game is going to be, because you're not being limited by any strength or flexibility issues. And then we have vertical jump. So once again, we have Mike Fagan right here. And then we can see that still their vertical jump scores have overall improved over the past few years. And then there's grip strength. So for here, what we have is the cap for grip strength on the men is going to be about 72 kilograms. For the elite level, obviously you could have more and still be an elite player, but since this is where we're seeing a lot of our elite players being, that's where we feel that the optimal area is going to be. It's probably around 60 to 70. And then the 12-minute run, you can see that we actually had one individual almost run 2 miles. And from our previous slide, we know that was Marshall Kent. And then this is Mike Fagan. So with the running, if we did have this 0 here, this value should move up some, so that we know that their fitness level is going up from year to year as well. So they're taking a lot more care of their bodies and their fitness levels. And then with their balance, their scores definitely went up over the previous year. We have a little bit larger range, but that's okay. They don't all have to score the same thing, but they're all going to be at above 85 was our minimum score, which is just right